Ethan was a soldier, just like many others, stationed on the remote planet of Zalor. His unit was part of a peacekeeping force, sent to maintain order in an area far away from the heart of the galaxy's political powers. Life on Zalor was quiet, but Ethan knew that quiet was only temporary. As a human soldier, he had learned the hard way that peace was often a thin veil, hiding the chaos beneath. Still, it was a job. And like every other soldier, he did his duty. On one of his routine patrols, Ethan found himself walking through the dense, strange forests that surrounded their base. The air was thick with humidity, and the smell of wet earth filled his nose. He knew this forest well, was full of life, though mostly in the form of strange plants and wildlife. The ground was soft, making each step feel as though he was walking through a sponge. As Ethan scanned the path ahead, he saw something movement in the distance. At first it was just a flicker of light, a glimmer. Then, through the thick green trees, he saw a figure, tall and imposing, standing still. Ethan's hand instinctively went to the blaster at his side, but he hesitated. It wasn't the first time he'd seen strange things in these woods. But something about this moment felt different. Curiosity got the better of him. Slowly he crept forward, trying to be as quiet as possible. The figure remained still, almost statuesque, despite Ethan's movement. As he got closer, the figure came into full view. She was tall, taller than most humans. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, like the dark ocean at night. Her eyes, though partially hidden behind a helmet, were bright and sharp, focused on something ahead of her. But it wasn't her appearance that caught Ethan's attention. It was the armor she wore. The armor was unlike anything he had ever seen. It looked ancient, but there was something undeniably advanced about it. The material shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting the green and gold of the forest. Each piece of the armor seemed to flow together like it was made from a single living thing. It was hard to explain, but it looked alive in a way that no human-made gear could. The design was elegant, with curved lines and intricate patterns that gave it a majestic, it's almost regal look. Ethan stood there, frozen for a moment, staring at the warrior. His instincts told him to stay hidden, to be cautious, but a part of him was too curious to move. The figure was watching him now, her helmet tilted slightly, as if assessing whether or not he was a threat. Ethan took a deep breath and made his move. Slowly, he stepped out from behind the trees, his hand still on his blaster, but lowered. The alien warrior didn't flinch or draw a weapon. Instead, she spoke, her voice calm and steady, though slightly muffled through her helmet. "You are human," she said. Ethan was surprised at how clear her voice was, considering the helmet she wore. But more than that, he was taken aback by the way she addressed him. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice a little hoarse, unsure of what else to say. "I am." Who are you?" The alien warrior paused for a long moment, and for the first time she seemed to soften. "I am Zira, of the Vakari tribe," she said. "I mean no harm." Vakari, Ethan had heard of them. Legendary warriors, nomads traveling across the galaxy. They were fierce, their name whispered among those who feared the unknown corners of space. Yet despite her intimidating presence, Zira seemed far from the savage warrior he had been told about. Zira stepped closer. And as she did, Ethan noticed something strange about the way her armor moved. It didn't just stay rigid. Parts of it seemed to shift slightly, almost as if it were reacting to her movements. The design wasn't just for protection. It was alive in some sense. He couldn't take his eyes off it. "That armor," he began, unsure how to phrase his question. "It's not like anything I've ever seen before." Zira's gaze flicked to her own armor, and a faint smile appeared on her face, though it was hidden behind her helmet. "This armor," she said, "is a gift from my people. It is more than just protection. It is part of us. It is the bond between us and our ancestors." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something about the way she spoke, the calm certainty in her voice, that made him believe every word. And yet part of him wondered if he could trust her. This was a warrior, an alien, standing before him, wearing something so advanced, That it didn't seem real? Why are you here? Ethan asked, his curiosity getting the better of him again. What do you want? Yes. Zyra's expression softened, and she lowered her head slightly, as though considering her words carefully. I come in peace, she said, but I need your help. Ethan blinked. Help? Why would she need his help? He was just a soldier, a simple man stationed on a backwater planet. But something about the situation felt urgent, and he knew this. Wasn't a chance encounter. Whatever was happening, it was about to change everything. I'm listening. Zyra took a deep breath, then looked directly at him. My people are in danger. My home, my planet, is under threat. And I need your help to stop it. Ethan's mind raced. He had expected many things, but this wasn't one of them. He wasn't sure what to make of the alien warrior or the strange armor, but one thing was clear. This was no ordinary encounter. Zyra needed him. And despite all the warnings, all the fears drilled into him about alien warriors, Ethan found himself wanting to help. The moment stretched on as the forest around them stood still, the air thick with unspoken promises of what was to come. Ethan stood in silence, trying to understand what Zyra had just said. Her words echoed in his mind, but they didn't quite make sense. Her planet was in danger, and she was asking for his help. Why him? He was just one soldier on a peaceful mission, far from the political struggles of the galaxy. He wasn't a hero. It was just a man trying to do his job. Zyra noticed his hesitation. She took a small step back, her gaze softening. She knew he wasn't fully convinced, and she didn't blame him. Humans had their own reasons for being cautious. But Zyra's mission was urgent, and she had no time to waste. You are not just any soldier, she said, her voice calm but firm. You are human. And your people, the humans, are stronger than you realize. You have something that my people do not. You have the ability to stand against the impossible. Ethan was confused. What do you mean by that? He asked. Zyra tilted her head, her eyes narrowing in thought. You come from a world where you have fought wars, where you have lost many battles, but you still rise again. You do not give up easily. That is why I need you. She took another step toward him, her powerful frame towering over him. I don't understand, Ethan muttered. Why me? What can I do? Zyra's gaze softened as she looked at him, her voice almost gentle. My people are warriors, but we are not as many as we once were. We do not have the strength in numbers that your people have. I need an ally, someone who understands what it means to fight for survival. My enemies are strong, and I cannot face them alone. I need someone who can think beyond the battlefield. Ethan felt a shift inside him, as if a small part of him had finally begun to understand the weight of her words. He wasn't sure if he believed everything she said, but he could see that Zyra wasn't like the enemies he had faced before. She wasn't here to harm him. She wasn't a conqueror or invader. She was a warrior just like him, trying to protect her people. The two stood in silence for a moment, the tension in the air thick. The sounds of the forest around them felt distant now, as if the world itself was waiting for Ethan's answer. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low but steady. All right, I'll help you, but I still don't understand what's happening. What exactly is the threat? Zyra's eyes darkened. It is not just one enemy, it is many. My planet is in the path of a powerful, ruthless force. They are known as the Vornok, a race of beings who take what they want by force. They do not negotiate. They do not care about the lives they destroy. Ethan's stomach tightened. The Vornok. He had heard of them. Their name was whispered in the darker corners of the galaxy, feared for their cruelty and their technology, which was unlike anything he had seen before. He had thought the Vornok were a myth, a legend told to scare children. But now Zyra's words made it all too real. The Vornok have already destroyed many worlds, she continued, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. They will stop at nothing to take what they want. My planet is next. I was sent here to find help, to find someone who could stand against them. And I believe you are the one who can help. Ethan could feel the weight of her plea. He had never been in a battle like the one Zyra described. The Vornok were beyond anything he had ever faced. But there was something about her, Something in the way she stood before him made him believe she wasn't lying. He looked at her armor again, still mesmerized by its strange living design. "And your armor? What's the story behind it?" he asked, trying to shift the conversation to something he could understand. Zyra's eyes flicked to her armor, and a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "This armor is more than just protection. It is a part of us. It was created from the remnants of a fallen star, and it bonds with its wearer. It responds to our thoughts and emotions. It is both a weapon and a shield." Ethan's eyes widened. He had seen many types of armor in his time, but nothing like this. It seemed like something out of a dream, an impossible creation. He reached out, almost without thinking, to touch the sleek surface. Zyra didn't stop him, but she did watch him closely. "The armor can protect you from any harm," she said softly. "But it does more than that. It strengthens you, connects you to the past and to your people. It gives you the power to fight when you feel you have nothing left to give." Ethan was still processing her words, still trying to make sense of everything. But one thing was clear: Zyra wasn't just any warrior. She was something more, something ancient and powerful. "All right," Ethan said, finally deciding, "I'll help you. We'll need a plan. You can't just charge in without knowing what we're up against." Zyra nodded, her eyes gleaming with a sense of determination. "I knew you would say that," she said with a hint of a smile. "That is why I came to you." For the first time, Ethan felt a strange sense of camaraderie with the alien warrior. She wasn't just a fighter. She was a leader, someone who had a plan and knew how to inspire others. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it with her. Together, they would face the Vornak. Together, they would fight to save her planet, and in doing so, perhaps save themselves. Ethan sat in the small shelter they had built in the dense forest, looking at Zyra as she carefully checked her gear. The campfire crackled softly, casting a warm glow on their surroundings. Despite the dangerous mission ahead, a sense of calm settled over Ethan. Zyra, though a stranger from a distant world, had quickly earned his trust. Her quiet strength and her determination to protect her people made him feel like they were on the same side. He had spent the last few hours asking her questions about her armor. Every time he thought he understood it, she would reveal something more surprising. At first, it had just seemed like an advanced suit designed for protection. But the more she spoke about it, the more he realized there was much more to it than he could possibly imagine. "I still don't get it," Ethan said, staring at the shimmering surface of her armor. "How does it work? It's not just metal, is it?" Zyra looked up at him, her expression softening. She knew he had been curious, and it was clear he wasn't going to stop asking questions. She sighed, as though preparing to reveal something deeply personal. The firelight flickered in her eyes. "The armor is not made from metal, not entirely," she said. "It's formed from the essence of a dying star. My ancestors, the Vakari, discovered a way to harness its power. We didn't just craft it, we bonded with it. It's alive in a way." Ethan blinked. Alive. The idea seemed almost impossible, but looking at the way her armor reacted to her movements, he couldn't deny there was something different about it. "Alive?" he repeated, trying to make sense of her words. Zyra nodded slowly. "As. The armor is not just protection for my body, it's part of who I am. It connects to my thoughts, my emotions, and even my strength. Adapts to my needs, changing shape to defend me or to give me power when I need it most." Ethan didn't know whether to be amazed or scared. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but here it was, right in front of him. He looked closely at the armor, examining the smooth surface and the intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. "Why haven't you told anyone else about it?" Ethan asked. "I mean, if this armor is so powerful, why hide it?" His expression grew more serious. She looked into the fire, her eyes distant. "Because it's dangerous," she said quietly. "It's not just a tool of strength, it's a weapon. The Vornak would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. They knew its true power. They would come after it and after me." Ethan understood now. This wasn't just about a battle for survival. It was about protecting something ancient, something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. He looked at Zyra with newfound respect. She wasn't just fighting for her people. She was fighting to protect the very heart of her civilization. "You're not just a warrior," Ethan said, a hint of awe in his voice. "You're carrying the legacy of your people." Zyra met his gaze, and for a moment she seemed vulnerable, as if the weight of her responsibility was too much to bear. "Yes," she whispered, "and it's a burden I carry alone." The silence between them was heavy. The fire crackled again, but it didn't seem to fill the space like it usually did. Ethan could see the sadness in Zyra's eyes, the loneliness that came with being the last of her kind to carry such an important legacy. "I don't want to be alone anymore," Zyra said softly, breaking the silence. "That's why I came. To you, I need an ally. Someone who doesn't fear what I carry, someone who can help me protect it." Ethan didn't know what to say. Wasn't sure if he was the right person for the job, but he felt a sense of duty rising within him. She had opened up to him, trusted him with her secret, and he wasn't about to let her down. "We'll protect it together," Ethan said, surprising himself with how firm his voice sounded. "I don't know much about this armor, but I know how to fight, and I know what it's like to have something worth protecting." Zyra smiled faintly, though it was more of a soft curve of her lips than a true smile. "Thank you, Ethan. I won't forget this." Just then, a sound broke the quiet night, a rustle in the trees, followed by a low growl. Ethan's hand instinctively went to his blaster, but Zyra raised a hand to stop him. "Stay calm," she whispered, her eyes scanning the darkness. "It's not an enemy, not yet." Ethan didn't lower his guard but nodded, trying to steady his breath. They both stood still, listening intently. The growl grew louder, closer. Then, from the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything Ethan had ever seen before. It was tall and covered in dark fur, with sharp claws and glowing yellow eyes that pierced the night. The creature didn't seem aggressive, but its size and strength were unmistakable. Zyra stood in front of Ethan, her hand raised. The creature stopped, its eyes locking with hers. Slowly, it lowered its head, as though acknowledging her authority. "This is a guardian," Zyra explained, her voice calm. "One of the protectors of the forest. It senses the energy of my armor. It knows I am not a threat." Ethan watched in awe as the creature turned and disappeared back into the trees, its glowing eyes fading into the darkness. He turned to Zyra, his heart still pounding. "That was amazing," Ethan said. "Still processing the sight? Is that armor really that powerful?" Zyra nodded. "Yes, it draws on the strength of the planet, the power of the stars. It can protect me from many things, even things beyond the ordinary." Ethan could feel the weight of what he had gotten himself into. This was no ordinary mission. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something much larger, something that could change the galaxy. "We have work to do," he said, his voice steady. "And we'll do it together." Zyra nodded, her face determined. Together, they would face the coming storm. And with the power of the ancient armor and their combined strength, they would fight to protect what was left of her people and their legacy. The night was quiet around them, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the calm was only temporary. The creature that had appeared at their camp, the guardian of the forest, was just the beginning of what might lie ahead. He turned back to Zyra, his thoughts racing. This mission, this journey, was becoming something far more complicated than just helping an alien warrior. He was starting to understand that the armor she wore was not just something that protected her hit, was a part of her people's history. It was something that could change the course of the war they were about to face. Zyra stood across from him, her gaze intense as she seemed to study the dark forest, her body still as a statue. Her armor shimmered in the light of the fire, almost alive in the way it responded to her every movement. Ethan couldn't stop staring at it. He had never seen anything like it in his life. He stepped closer, unable to help himself. "You said, it's alive. What exactly do you mean by that?" His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might somehow break the strange connection that had formed between them. Zyra turned to face him. The helmet covered most of her face, but Ethan could see the slight curve of her mouth, just enough to know she was contemplating his question. She finally took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady but filled with the weight of her words. This armor was made long ago by my ancestors. It is woven from the remnants of a star that died 1,000 lifetimes ago. It holds the power of that star's energy, and when my people wear it, we bond with it. It connects us to the land, to the stars, and to each other. Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. I don't understand, he admitted. You're saying that armor is part of you? Zyra nodded. Yes, it is not just a tool for protection. It responds to my thoughts, my emotions, and even my body's needs. When I wear it, it's like I become a part of something much larger than myself. It's like the stars themselves are with me, guiding me. Ethan's mind raced, trying to process the concept. He had seen a lot of advanced technology in his time as a soldier, but this was something beyond what he thought was possible. The armor wasn't just advanced, it was alive. It was tied to the very soul of Zyra's people. I had no idea. Something like this existed, Ethan said, still trying to wrap his mind around the idea. But if it's that powerful, why keep it a secret? Why not tell everyone about it? Zyra's gaze softened, and she stepped closer to him. It's not just a weapon, Ethan, she said quietly. It's a part of us. And not everyone is ready for that kind of power. My people learned the hard way, that those who seek power without understanding it will destroy everything. If the wrong hands were to take this armor, they could use it to conquer, to destroy. That's why I came to you. I need someone who will protect it, someone who can help me stop those who want to take it. Ethan stood still, feeling the weight of her words. He had always thought of war in terms of guns and ships, of strategies and tactics. But this was something different. This armor wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of life, of history, of an entire people who had survived against all odds. And now, it was his responsibility too. He looked at her again, seeing her not just as a warrior, but as someone who carried the hopes of her people. I'm in, Ethan said, his voice firm. Whatever it takes, I'll help you protect it, Zyra gave him a brief but thankful nod. Then, without another word, she turned back to the fire, her mind clearly elsewhere. Ethan wasn't sure if he had fully grasped the importance of what he had just agreed to, but he knew one thing. He wasn't backing down now. They spent the rest of the night in quiet preparation. Zyra checked her armor again, running her fingers over the surface as though speaking to it. Ethan couldn't help but watch, fascinated by how the armor seemed to respond to her touch. Shifting ever so slightly with each movement, as dawn broke over the horizon, they packed up their things and prepared to move forward. The Vornak, the enemy Zyra spoke of, were still out there, and they had no idea how long they had before they came for her people. But Ethan knew one thing for sure. This mission was far from over. I've learned everything I need to know about this forest, Zyra said, her voice calm and confident. But now we need to move fast. We cannot risk the Vornak finding us before we are ready. Ethan nodded. They were about to embark on a journey deeper into enemy territory, and every step would be a risk. But there was no turning back now. As they began their trek, the forest around them seemed to grow quieter. The sounds of wildlife faded into the background, replaced by an eerie stillness. The trees grew taller and denser, and the path grew narrower. Zyra led the way, her armor moving fluidly with her every step. Ethan followed closely behind, trying to stay alert for any signs of danger. A few hours into their journey, they reached the edge of the forest and stood atop a high ridge, overlooking a wide valley below. In the distance, Ethan could see smoke rising into the air, a sign of activity. But it wasn't just any smoke, it was the smoke of a battle. This is it, Zyra whispered. The Vornak are already here. We need to move quickly. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he looked down at the smoke. This was real. The war was here, and they had no time to waste. He turned to Zyra, who stood tall and determined. Do we do now? Zyra's eyes locked onto the valley below. We prepare. We fight. With that, they began their descent into the valley, ready to face whatever came next. And with Zyra's armor and the strength they now shared, Ethan knew. They had a fighting chance. Ethan's heart raced as he followed Zyra down the steep path leading into the valley. The smoke ahead grew thicker, and the distant sounds of battle reached their ears like a deep hum in the air. The Vornok were not just coming, they were. Already here, Zyra's movements were swift and quiet, her armor blending with the environment. She was in her element. Ethan, on the other hand, was still adjusting to the strange sense of responsibility he felt now. He had never been in a war like this before, where the stakes felt so high, where the outcome could change everything. But Zyra was depending on him. He couldn't afford to falter. The valley was wide, and from their vantage point on the ridge, they could see the enemy's encampment in the distance. The Vornok were a terrifying sight. Tall, muscular, with dark, jagged armor that looked like it had been pieced together from the remains of old battlefields. Their weapons were massive, and their soldiers moved with a brutal efficiency that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Zyra stopped at the edge of the valley, crouching low to the ground. She motioned for Ethan to do the same. He knelt beside her, his breath shallow as he tried to make himself as invisible as possible. "Do you see them?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The Vornok have set up camp near the river. They're waiting for reinforcements." Ethan scanned the area, trying to keep his movements minimal. He could make out several Vornok warriors standing guard, their eyes scanning the surroundings. In the center of the camp was a massive war machine, something unlike anything he had ever seen before. It looked like a cross between a tank and a ship, its dark metal surface gleaming under the sun. Zyra's gaze was fixed on the war machine. "That is their leader's vehicle," she said softly. "It's heavily guarded, but if we can get to it, we might be able to disable it." Ethan nodded. He didn't know much about the Vornok, but he knew that taking down their leaders' war machine would be a huge blow to their morale. It was a risk, but it was one they had to take. "How do we get close?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Zyra looked at him, her eyes narrowed. "We move fast, stay hidden, and strike when the moment is right. You have to trust me." Ethan didn't hesitate. He knew there was no other choice. "Let's do it." With that, they began to move, staying close to the shadows of the valley's rocky outcroppings. Ethan was careful not to make a sound, watching every step he took. Zyra led the way, her armor seeming to meld with the environment, its sleek design making her almost invisible in the shadows. As they crept closer to the camp, Ethan's nerves were on edge. The Vornok were getting closer, their voices growing louder, their laughter echoing through the air. They were distracted, but they wouldn't be for long. The war machine in the center of the camp loomed larger with each step they took. Zyra signaled for Ethan to stop as they reached a small ridge that overlooked the camp. From here, they could see the full scope of the Vornok's forces. There were dozens of warriors, some armed with massive energy weapons, others with sharp, jagged blades. Their leader's vehicle stood in the middle, guarded by the fiercest warriors. "We need to create a diversion," Zyra whispered. "I can draw their attention. While they're focused on me, you can sneak into the camp and plant the charges on the vehicle." Ethan frowned. "That's risky. What if they catch?" Zyra's lips curved into a slight smile. "I've been in far worse situations than this. Trust me, I'll be fine." Ethan wanted to argue to tell her that it was too dangerous, but he knew that she was right. She was the only one who could pull this off. He had to trust her. "All right," he said, taking a deep breath. "I'll be ready." Zyra nodded, then stood up, moving out of the shadows. Ethan watched her, his heart pounding in his chest. She moved with such grace, such confidence, that for a moment she seemed almost otherworldly. Her armor shimmered in the light, a beacon of strength and power. She didn't look back as she walked toward the Vornok camp, her movements deliberate. The Vornok guards saw her almost immediately. One of them shouted, and before Ethan could even blink, the Vornok were charging toward her. Ethan's eyes widened as the battle began. Zyra didn't hesitate. She drew her weapon, an elegant sword that seemed to pulse with the energy of her armor. She met the Vornok head-on, moving faster than any of them had anticipated. Her armor shifted with each strike, enhancing her strength and speed. She was like a whirlwind, cutting through the enemy's ranks with deadly precision. Ethan didn't wait a second longer. As soon as the Vornak were distracted, he moved, slipping into the camp as quietly as he could. His pulse was racing, but he focused on his task. The war machine was just ahead, and it was heavily guarded. He had to be quick. He crept up behind the vehicle, hiding behind a large pile of debris. From here, he could see the armored guards standing around the vehicle, unaware of his presence. They were focused on Zyra, still battling in the distance. Ethan pulled the charges from his pack and began to attach them to the war machine's main engine. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to stay steady. He had to work. If he could disable the Vornix leader's vehicle, they would have a chance. Just as he finished planting the last charge, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. He froze, his heart pounding in his ears. He turned quickly, seeing one of the Vornak warriors walking in his direction. The guard's eyes locked onto him, and for a split second, time seemed to slow down. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his blaster and fired, taking the Vornak guard down in one shot. The guard crumpled to the ground, and Ethan quickly moved to hide behind the war machine. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and to move fast. The cave was small, but safe, a temporary refuge from the chaos outside. Inside, the air was cool and damp, and the sounds of the battle seemed distant, like an echo of a nightmare. Ethan and Zyra sat in the shadows, their backs to the rocky walls. The only light came from a small fire that Zyra had started to keep them warm, but even that seemed weak, as if it too was struggling to stay alive. Ethan's thoughts raced as he looked at Zyra. She had been through so much, her people, her planet. Her armor, it was all connected to her, and now it was connected to him too. He had never imagined his life would lead him to this moment, fighting side by side with an alien warrior to protect something much bigger than himself. "Are you okay?" Breaking the silence. He had seen Zyra in battle, cutting down Vornak warriors with the precision of a master, but she was still human, or at least as human as one could be with a bond to ancient armor. Zyra looked up at him, her expression unreadable. She had been silent for a while, lost in her own thoughts. The weight of everything they were facing seemed to hang heavy on her shoulders. "I'm fine," she replied, but there was something in her voice that made Ethan believe otherwise. "We've won a small victory, but the war is far from over. Vornak won't give up easily." Ethan nodded, understood. They had managed to disable the war machine and take down a few of the Vornak's strongest warriors, but it wasn't enough. The Vornak were a force to be reckoned with, and if they regrouped, they would come back stronger. Zyra was right. They needed a plan, I know, Ethan said. But we've got something they don't. We've got you, and we've got the armor. Zyra's eyes flicked to her armor, still resting against the cave wall. The shimmering surface seemed to glow faintly. In the dim light, she had explained to Ethan earlier how it wasn't just a tool, it was alive, a part of her people's legacy. She didn't need to say anything more. Ethan knew how much it meant to her, and he knew it was more than just a symbol of strength. It was a weapon, a protector. And, in a way, it was her. "The armor is a gift and a curse," Zyra said quietly, her voice softer now. "It gives me power, but it also connects me to the past. To the ones who came before me. I can feel their strength, their wisdom, but I can also feel their pain, the weight of their sacrifices. It's a constant reminder that the fight is never over." Ethan listened, understanding the burden she carried. It wasn't just about protecting her people. It was about carrying the weight of generations, the hopes and dreams of an entire civilization. The armor wasn't just a tool, it was a connection to everything she had lost, everything she still had to protect. "You don't have to do this alone," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I'm here. We're in this together." Zyra looked at him, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something softer in her eyes. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper. Maybe trust. Maybe something more. "I know," she said quietly, "and I'm thankful for that." The moment stretched between them, filled with the weight of everything they had been through and everything they still had to face. The Vornak would be coming, and they wouldn't wait long, but for now, They had a moment of peace. A moment. To prepare. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the cave entrance. Ethan's hand went instinctively to his blaster. But it was only Zyra's Scouta, a small creature, part of her people's tribe, who had managed to slip through. The enemy's lines, the creature's presence was a sign that the Vornok were closing in on their position. "They're gathering," Scout said, its voice high-pitched but urgent. "The Vornok are regrouping. They'll be here by morning." Zyra nodded. "Need to move. Now." Without wasting a second, she stood up, grabbing her armor and quickly securing it onto her body. The armor seemed to adjust to her movements, almost as if it were eager to be worn again. Ethan grabbed his gear, his mind already working on a plan. They couldn't stay in the cave. They had to strike before the Vornok had a chance to regroup. "I'll get the charges," Ethan said, reaching for his pack. "We can plant them around the perimeter of the valley. If we can take out their supply lines, it might give us enough time to escape." Zyra nodded, already moving toward the cave exit. "Agreed, but we'll need to get close. We'll need to move fast." Ethan followed her out into the darkness. The air was cold now, the temperature dropping as the night settled in. The sky above was clear and the stars shone brightly. It was hard to believe that such beauty could exist in the midst of a war, but here it was silent and untouched. Reminder of everything they were fighting to protect. They moved quickly, carefully, staying hidden in the shadows as they made their way toward the valley. The Vornok were out there, somewhere, and they knew that every step they took could be their last. But they couldn't afford to hesitate. They had a job to do, and they would do it together as they reached the edge of the valley. Zyra's armor seemed to hum with energy, the connection between her and the armor stronger than ever. Ethan could feel the power radiating off her, the energy that came from the armor, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. "You're ready," he said, his voice filled with determination. Zyra turned to him, her expression hardening. As she faced the looming threat ahead, "We're ready." The final battle was about to begin. No matter what happened, Ethan knew one thing he wasn't.